Hi everyone, and welcome back to Hoopsa. I am pleased to be joined today by former QPR manager Mark Warburton for a chat. How are you, Mark?
Very well, thanks, Connor. All is good.
Good, glad to hear. Well, we're here to chat primarily about your time as QPR manager between 2019 and 2022, but I wanted to kick things off by going back to the very start of your career as a player and work forwards from there. So, you spent time in Leicester City's academy between 1977 and 1979. Then there was 4 years with Enfield as a defender, where you won the FA Trophy and Alliance Premier League, and then later played for Boreham Wood as well. So, what made you want to play football, and how do you look back on your playing days?
Oh, listen, I was a bang average conference lower league type player, Connor, but I was always good at sport. Very lucky that sport came easy. So I was I'm saying it very humbly, I was a very decent runner. Sports just came easy. Tennis, cricket, basketball, whatever it was. So I was very, very lucky in that respect. So I always loved the game. Leicester was a challenging time because for the first time at 16 years of age, Connor, you're suddenly thrown into this brutal environment. And I had a manager called Jock Wallace. And bizarrely, 35 years later or more, I'm in his office managing the mighty Glasgow Rangers, which is quite bizarre, his beloved Rangers. But at the time, I'd never come across anyone of that nature. He was a Marine, tough as nails. It was a kick bite type environment. And it was really new. And people say to you, oh, it makes you a man. I never just, it made me hate the game, which I never thought I'd ever say that. Went into, as I said, some opportunities, went into playing with Enfield, had a really good top team at the time, really enjoyed it. But as I say, that coincided with going to the city and the trading markets again, which I had 20 plus years and thoroughly enjoyed it. But I combined that with both playing semi-pro, Connor, but wherever I worked and lived in the world, I went to Chicago, to Charlotte, to Asia, Hong Kong, Tokyo, New York, etc. I always coached just because you had an English accent. As bizarre as that may sound, if you spoke English, you must know about football. That was the mentality, and it allowed me to coach any under nine girls, bank teams, college teams, high school teams, you name it. Great experience. So that was really the love of football. Wherever I worked, I've always kept myself fit and I've always had a passion for the game.
And so obviously you had that total career change becoming a City trader, which I think you said was for 20 years, and you kept your coaching going along that time. So was that a constant all the way through from taking up trading, or did you sort of have a break and then come back into coaching?
No, that wasn't a constant at all. I fell into that, as I say, wherever I worked. I moved to Charlotte, for example, in '84 as a really young guy playing for the local professional team, which the bank sponsored. And suddenly I find myself, yeah, as I said, yeah, when I was walking over going for a run, actually, can you coach the girls team? Under nine girls. Then you find yourself taking the high school team. Then you're asked to take the bank team. Then I took a local Italian team. Then I went to Chapel Hill and to work with UNC. And it's just, I didn't realize all this was going on. I was just enjoying myself. I'm a young single guy enjoying myself. Um, it wasn't until my son, who went on to be a good pro, that he was taken as a young academy player at under nine by, I think, Arsenal, Tottenham, wanted to went to Watford in the end, which is, I thought, a better choice. But they said to me, "What badge have you got?" And I had no idea kind of what they were talking about, um, in my ignorance. So quickly went through levels one, two, and three, and had someone fast tracking me who said I was, he spoke very highly and got me fast tracked. And I think it was around 2002, three, something like that. I find myself doing my A license with the likes of Ray Wilkins, Dean Saunders, Barry Horn, Clayton Blackmore, Chris Coleman, Adrian Heath, these type, but guys that I'm watching on the TV at the weekend, and I'm senior trader at RBS or somewhere doing my A license, and that was the moment, really. That was the time. So that was it. It wasn't this. The city was a competitive, really high pressurized environment. I loved every minute of that 20-year spell. So yeah, I love in competitive environments, Colin. And that was a natural for me. It was a natural transition to move back into sport.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And eventually you decided to leave the world of trading permanently, and you've sort of furthered your coaching education with a self-funded year abroad, learning from coaches at Sporting Lisbon, PSV, Ajax, and Barcelona. How important was that period in influencing your own management style?
Massively important. I was lucky that I don't know what I just say I don't know. I'd saved money to make sure I gave myself a 10-year window, kind of leaving a well-paid job and that I'd put money aside and I gave myself 10 years. That sounds a bit of a lengthy period, but you have to give you time to establish yourself. Never had a playing career of like a Steven Gerrard or Frank Lampard or Wayne, any of these type of people. So I saw myself in the academy and I wanted to go and understand better how young players learn. I wanted to understand what world class was because people say to you, "Oh, he's top draw him." No, he's not. He's okay. He's decent, but he's not top draw. He's not world class. So I wanted to go places like that, like PSG, like Ajax, and Anderlecht, and all these various clubs, Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, to find out, understand how they learned, what were the practices, what was good, what were the learning processes in terms of age. Some later birthdays, certainly UK, the June, July birthdays suffer enormously. So understanding rates of growth, rates of progress, etc. So it was an expensive year, but it was a really good year, well spent in terms of understanding more. When I went into Watford after that year, I was far more confident, Connor, far more having a belief that I could go in there and make an impact, which is the key. If you can't go in there and change anything, why go in there at all?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And so you were offered that permanent youth coaching role at Watford. You later became academy director in 2006. And then in 2011, you then joined Brentford as a first team coach under caretaker manager Nicky Forster. What was that jump from coaching youth players to a first team squad like for the first time?
That was huge. I mean, Nicky had never coached. Nicky was playing. But he was a figurehead that the fans knew. And Matthew Benham, the owner, knew that they needed someone to recognise. But in truth, I did everything. That was, and Nicky won't mind me saying, Nicky and I are getting great. He's a top lad. But I just came in and did everything. And what you realise, Connor, is you have to adopt the same principles. You have to make sure they enjoy it. You have to make sure it's structured, that it's organised, that they know what's ahead of them. And you have to make, as I say, you have to make sure when they drive in the morning, they're looking forward to it. When they drive out, they're better for it, if that makes sense. And that never changes. Doesn't matter whether you play for PSG, Barcelona, Liverpool, or United, or whether you're playing for Regias Rovers. It doesn't matter. You've got to make sure that the players enjoy coming to work every day. So no, that was it. I really enjoyed that period. Wanted to get the job on a full-time basis, but Matthew chose Uwe Rosler and made me technical director, which in hindsight was the best possible thing. It was
Mm.
brilliant in terms of I was in charge of first team academy. I was in charge of all the support services, medical, analytical, coaching, sports science, etc., logistics kit, but dealing with agents, signing players. He said it was a fantastic 2 year education, which I can't be thankful enough to Matthew for.
And then you eventually did become Brentford manager 2 years later, and you since managed Rangers, Nottingham Forest, and QPR. You took Brentford up from League One to the Championship. You won both the Scottish Championship and the Scottish Challenge Cup with Rangers. How different have each of those jobs been, and which have you found the most challenging?
Really different. I mean, Brentford 18th in League One when we went in there, and I'm saying this in a very humble please. There's nothing arrogant about it. We left missing out in Premier League playoffs to Middlesbrough. So we've come from 18th in one to just missing out Premier League, and with a group of players who were magnificent, and people like James Tarkowski, who's at Everton, and Stewie Dallas, and Adam Forshaw, and Johnny Douglas, and all. I could reel off this team who really came together. That was a fantastic experience because I'd signed a lot of the players with Matthew, etc. And then you're working with them on a day-to-day basis, and we're getting promotion, and you're bonding, and you're winning, and there's nothing better, Connor, than that. So that you have that, and then that sets you up to go to a club like Rangers. And without being rude to anyone at the clubs I've had a fortune to manage in England, Glasgow Rangers is a different proposition. People down south do not know how big Rangers and Celtic are. They have no idea of it, and it's a combination of just ignorance. It's a combination of just we just don't we're not aware. But they're two huge global institutions, and that was just a massive privilege. I mean, the press alone, Connie, you're dealing with. I remember we would do hours every week. I think the press on a Thursday was like 3 hours before we even started. Your local radio, national radio, local TVs, club channels, all the skies and everything else you would do. And when I went to Forest, the guy said, "Oh, we got the press. Would you mind? It's going to take about 12, 15 minutes." Let's go 12, 15 minutes. But that was Rangers is such a big club, and you learned so much in that respect. That was good. Nottingham Forest was a privilege again because they're twice European champions. But I always felt, and I've said it very openly, no disrespect in any shape or form. The new owner came in, Mr. Marinakis, who's doing a great job there now. New owner came in, and it was very much. I was my first day. They were telling me to prepare for Brian Clough's 40th anniversary of winning the European Cup, in 1978, 79. And I'm like, wow, how do we move on? It was just you felt that the club was weighed down, and that's why Mr. Marinakis' staff does a great job to shake that off finally. Um, And as I say, from there, obviously QPR was for me was fantastic because you're given time, and we'll obviously talk about it more, but the fan base were loyal, really loyal, and I felt I had a really good rapport with the Brentford guys, really good with Rangers. Didn't have that same because of the dynamic with Forest and the way it was changing and relegation fights, etc. But then at QPR, I thought the fans were really loyal and they seemed to enjoy the brand of football. And I just felt very, very much at home at Loftus Road.
Now let's talk about that time at QPR. You're announced as Steve McLaren's successor on the 8th of May 2019. How did the job come about for you? And coming into a team that had finished 19th the season before, what did the club set as your objective for that 2-year contract?
Well, I think that the initial thing was survival. That's not being negative, but 19th and the club's had a tough one. We walked into 5 contracts immediately being players we couldn't afford to keep. The likes of people I knew, the likes of Jake Bidwell and these guys, the club couldn't afford to keep. So we had a budget cut and we had that. So it was very much a case of can you rely on the young players and can you work with the loan market, etc. And developing that relationship with Les and I obviously John Eustace had been at the club with Steve, but John had been a player at Watford when I was academy director at Watford, so we knew each other very well. So that was a plus, Connor. But it was very much survival sounds like a really negative objective, but when you come 19th, it's like the clubs in the Premier League. Their first thought is to stay in the Premier League. There's 150 million reasons why you stay in the Premier League. In the Championship again, the club had a tough season, come 19th and had been hovering above the relegation zone. And as such, that was the first one. But then was to move us up and to build a squad and develop a squad and to try and introduce a style of play which was representative of the club's philosophy and one that was suited the young players and one that obviously suited the fan base. That was another key aspect of it.
You mentioned the transfer activity ahead of that first season. I think Liam Kelly was one of only 12 players that wasn't on a free transfer. Was it clear when you took the job that you'd have no money to spend that summer? And how hard is it trying to make a team competitive in the Championship with sort of little financial power behind it?
It's brutally hard, Connor. It's hard for the fans because the fans vent their fury on the board. But, at the end of the day, I'm trying to give an example here. At the end of the day, the owners write checks. And for example, I might try and in one window try and get rid of 3 or 4 players to try and reduce the wage bill, thinking, great, I can go and get if I've taken 50 grand off the wage bill, I can go and get this player. No, because the owner just turns around and says, I'm writing a check for 50 grand less. It's not, I'm not writing a check. I'm still writing checks. So it's very much understanding that these are the guys, look back to Brentford when Matthew and I had that disagreement about players coming in. The owners write the checks, and you've never ever got to lose sight of that fact and respect that fact as well. So it's tough in a Championship because it's a brutal league, as we mentioned earlier. There's no easy games. You have teams coming up. Look at the Sunderland last year and these type of teams in Ipswich in League One. Look at the teams that are down there, the Boltons and the Wigans and the Sheffield Wednesdays were there before, and these huge teams, Connor. So it's very much a case of you've got to give yourself a platform, give yourself a chance to survive and then build. And you've got to do that with a combination of good senior players, young ones coming through, hungry, good loan market, etc. Because it's just a brutally challenging league. And I know for you fans, there's many, many questions, and very often we can't always answer the questions. But that was the first objective. Make sure QPR are hard to beat. QPR are attractive on the eye, can create chances and can give shocks. And we did that. We look at the first games and Stoke away and these type of games. We had good young players, good blend, good mix, and there were some nice early signs there.
Yeah, of course. And then the squad rebuild continued in the summer of 2020. But this time, the sale of Eze enabled some spending ahead of your second season, with fees paid for the likes of Luke Amos, Lyndon Dykes, Dickey, Bon, Willock, and Charlie Kelman. But it was then a tough start to the season, with QPR winning just 4 games out of 22 before the turn of the year. Why, in your view, did the season start off so, in such a difficult nature?
This is the brutal nature of football, and this is where the QPR fans are really good. Today's a really honest interview. The QPR fans are great because I think we were creating so many chances. There's one game sticks out in my mind, Connor, Bristol City at home, where we absolutely battered them. I think it was 27 chances to 2, and they won 2-1. Or it was just bizarre. And even after, the manager said, I'm embarrassed to even do it. That's football. It's about scoring goals. Goals change games. But I knew and John and the staff knew, and the players knew, we were creating so many chances. And when you create, sometimes you can win games, lose games, odd goal. But when you know you're creating chances, I was never concerned about the team. I was frustrated that it's not being more clinical, as the fans were. But the fans never turned. The fans were always supportive because I thought we were playing some really good football. You know, the likes of Dickey and Johan Barbe and the Lee Wallaces and these players. And we had the midfield and we were really in good shape. But it was just getting the results. And when it clicked, which it did straight after the Wickham game, I think, you know, from there onwards, I'm told, and you might correct me, I think we were second only to Man City in terms of performance from for the whole of 2021, which tells you a lot about the quality of the players.
Yeah, of course. I mean, four loans came in that January: Austin, Device, Johansson, and Field. And that season did U-turn. So Rangers won 15 and drew two of the remaining 24 matches and finished ninth. So were you confident of turning the season around before those additions came in? Or like, how important were they to sort of bolster what we already had?
Oh no, we needed experience. You know, we've tried Stefan. People like Stefan Johansson, their experience. I knew him from Celtic, Connor. He played against us up there, and they're international players who have that ability when they're hungry as well. They're hungry for success. They want to play. They want to showcase their talents. Steph wasn't getting that chance at Fulham, um, you know, despite being a top player. And that type of introduction is so useful to you to come in. When you got Lee Wallace at the back and Barber and Dickey, and when you've got the likes of Steph and you got Charlie and these type of players supplemented with the really talented young players as well, you're in good shape. You know, you're in good shape. So you never underestimate what the impact of one player can be both on and off the pitch, really.
And then all four of those loan players were made permanent in summer 2021. A number of other additions were made to the squad, including Sam McCallum and Andre Gray on loan. How much say did you have over signings and recruitment in general during your time at QPR? And were the club clear that summer that the objective was now promotion to the Premier League?
Yeah, that was always yeah, of course. Les and I would speak all the time about the type of players, what we need. The only thing I think there's a disagreement was I knew academy football, you know, and I think there was this belief that there was a huge swathe of talented boys coming through, and I wasn't seeing that. Not, I'm just being brutally honest here. I wasn't talented footballers, yes, good lads, yes, polite, respectful, good, hungry, yes, but we needed more than that to get promotion to the Premier League, to get QPR in the playoffs. When you look at the types of teams you're playing against and the quality of players you're playing against, players that come down from the Premier League, etc. You've got to make sure you have enough quality about you. And this lovely ideal. My background is youth, Connor. Nothing gives me more pleasure than watching a young player come through, give him his debut, watch him thrive, develop, embrace. Fantastic. That's what we all love to see. But the harsh reality of the championship is you've got to make sure you win games of football. And coming ninth, and we were level with Cardiff eighth, I think it was. You look at it, and then suddenly they're saying, "Oh, now you're in the playoffs. No, no, anything outside the playoffs is failure." Now, the
Mm.
following year, we started off really well, I believe. Really well. It was going really well until we played Barnsley away. And you just felt Lyndon missed a header late on in the game to go 1-1. And it just felt that we weren't fluid. There was no fluency to our play. It was scrappy. You know, we should have nicked the 1-0. It was an open chance. We missed the 1-0, but it was a really poor game. And that was when, for me, when you start to see it. And then that was a struggle. We lost a couple, and then you start to see the injuries. And that's the most frustrating thing, probably jumping ahead to one of your questions. But if you remember, we had a brutal injury run, brutal. And that's the frustration. When you lose key players, it is so hard in the championship because the games just come Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. You get a 2-week knock, you can miss 5 games.
Mm.
It's quite ludicrous, but that's the championship, Connor. We know what the challenges are. But I think we had a combination of events were good. The expectation was very, very high. But I remember getting a phone call when we slipped outside the top six for the first time that season. I was at Hanger Lane roundabout in the traffic. Not that it's borne on my mind at all. I was at Hanger Lane roundabout, and I almost got the call saying, you know, your position's being considered. And I've gone, we've been top six all season.
Mm.
And you just go, our budget is probably 15th or worse. And yet now, and that's the thing about the championship is expectation doesn't marry up with actual budget reality. You know, that was the thing. Go back to Scotland. We got promoted with Rangers, as you mentioned, but Celtic's budget was at least 5 times at that time. I had players on 1500, 2 grand a week up against proven internationals, Armstrong, Brown, etc. All these various ways, McGregor's playing for Scotland and playing for Celtic. You can't close that gap. You can have good games or one-off games, but it's so hard to close it. And the budget was always smaller, Connor. So that was, you could sense the frustration because we were fighting against that. And top 10 was always going to be good for QPR. Of course you want playoffs. Of course you want to go up. Who doesn't?
Mhm.
I just felt that the moment we were in seventh to get the call, you think, wow, expectations is now a little bit out of control here.
Yeah, and I mean, in April 2022, it was then announced that you would be departing the club at the end of the season. So we got that announcement before the season had even ended. So you've touched on it a little bit there, but how did you feel at the time that decision was actually made? And how do you feel about it now, 2.5 years on?
Angry, angry. Every manager can sit there and talk about injury crisis. Look at Newcastle last year. Look at the horrendous injury run, but then you saw Eddie Howe, is he going to stay? Is he going to go? All this type of nonsense. But we did have a brutal run. If you remember when we had 4 goalies or 5 goalies out, and then you lose Rob Dickey and you lose Stefan and you lose Chrissy Willock, all 3 of them at Nottingham Forest, if you remember, away when David Marshall pulled his hamstring to lose 2 goalkeepers. Chrissy pulled his hamstring. He was out for 12, both out for 12 weeks or more. Rob Dickey gone. Steph then pulls up with a calf, and you go, wow, we've just had the core ripped out of our team here. So it is difficult. And I just felt that if you look now, I think we came, was it 13th that season?
Yeah.
Is that right? So disappointing having been top 6 for so long, but became 13th, still above our budget, horrible injury crisis. You sold your best player and you've integrated others. And I just felt with likes of Sam Field, Joanne, Rob, we were in a good place. Lee Wallace was doing a great role for us when he was obviously getting towards the end of his career, but fantastic mentoring role. And I felt we were okay and it'd be understood. When the contract wasn't extended, so disappointed, so frustrated because there's work to do. And that sounds really corny. I apologize to support for that, but you just so into the club, so integrated in the club that you didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming at all. And frustration, anger, annoyance, whatever you want to say, you can imagine the emotions.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I wanted to speak a bit about there was an article that was published by West London Sport in May that year that talked about your relationship with the likes of Les Ferdinand, Chris Ramsey, and the board, sort of suggesting that those relationships have broken down before your departure over those disagreements on the kind of academy routes into the first team, etc. Do you think that's a fair representation of it? I mean, you've spoken already about how you disagreed, but to say those relationships are broken down long before, and that's essentially what led to your departure, would you agree with that?
No, I think Chris Ramsey, for example, myself, we were friends for a long time. And Chris was at Spurs, and I have a huge respect for Chris in terms of his coaching CV and his experiences and what he's done, etc. Les was a world-class player, and etc. And he is QPR through and through. So there's no lack of respect. But I'm the one. I'm saying I'm the one. Marty's the one now. You're on the touchline, and the fans vent their joy or their frustration at you. And when I'm hearing that there's, you've got to throw these young players, I would get phone calls from certain people. I won't say who. I get phone calls from certain people saying, "Why aren't you playing him? Why aren't you playing him?" And then I find they go out on loan to Hemel Hempstead, or I'm not being rude to Hemel at all. I'm just saying, I'm going, well, if they're going to leave for the Championship, they're going out on loan to League One or maybe top League Two or, that type of thing to play football and to come back and benefit QPR. And my big frustration, I don't mind saying, Les and we had this discussion, we see each other golf and I hope very much we're still good friends, is that they were not that good. And the reason I'm saying that with confidence is they're not there now and they never really played for QPR. So all these names that were being thrown to the fans and in the program and up and coming star, superstar coming through the ranks. And I'm going, well, they're not there. And no manager's played them since. And they've disappeared. And I wish them well because they're nice guys. But it's never disrespect to them. But they weren't good enough to get QPR where the fans want. And of course, the manager wants a club to get to, Connor. And if I fill out a team full of academy players and the fans go, great before the whistle, fantastic, and we get pumped 4-0. Do we turn around and go, it doesn't matter, we got beat 4-0, but hey, we played 11 academy kids. It doesn't work that way. They've got to be good enough. And I never felt that we were good enough. We never had the money to invest in the recruitment to go and get the best players. We were getting I'm saying the cast offs, we were getting from various clubs. And I just felt that we weren't producing enough players that could impact the first team. So when I was being told that we did, I should be bleeding the answers in. No, they weren't good enough there. And as I say, I'm not in an arrogant way, but that's been proven by the fact that none of them are at the club now.
Looking back on your time with QPR overall, do you have any regrets, or is there anything you wish that you could have done differently?
Regrets in how it ended. Regrets in that I'd like to be there, and I felt there's so much work to do, and staff were good, and people like Imi, and good physio guys there, and but there's some changes you could make to keep it fresh. You have to do that in every organisation. Um, but I think committed everything to it, and I never felt regret that we didn't do some things that we should have done. Could we have made different decisions on one or two transfers? Maybe, but that goes for every manager or coach. But as I said to you at the start, what was important, you always gauge yourself by your relationship with the fan base. And I always felt that was good. I always felt that was strong. And I think back to the last game, Swansea away, when we won 1-0. And the reception you get from the fan base was such that it says, yeah, there was really good feedback. So, yeah, I just really enjoyed it. We always privileged when you work in football, Connor. When you're a manager, there's only so many jobs available, and even less so for British managers now and coaches. So, you always know how privileged you are, but I just felt that I did a good job for QPR, and QPR was good to me in terms of the fan base and that. So, no, the biggest regret is not having the opportunity to still be there, so to speak, and carry on the work.
Would you ever go back to QPR in any capacity in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a definite trend in the country right now. You're seeing it to go for young managers. I think the rise of technical directors, younger foreign technical directors, are more comfortable getting in younger managers. I understand that. I mean, I can't, could you imagine a 45-year-old technical director getting in Sam Allardyce or or Alan Pardew or Steve Bruce or David Moyes or senior managers who have probably been in the game much longer, far more experience. I don't think that human nature allows them to do that. So they go for younger managers on shorter term contracts. But that's the trend. My frustration is that I was told the other day, when did you retire? I've never retired. It's just so hard to get jobs in British football now. The right jobs. You can't be at clubs like Brentford, QPR, Rangers, Forest, etc., and West Ham, and then take a job way down below the level. That's not for me. So yeah, I would absolutely. I'm keen to work. I've got an offer stateside which I'm looking at, and it's really exciting opportunity. But there is certainly a part of you that's aggrieved that you're seen to be over the hill when you're probably in the best shape of your life, really. So that's just British football, and it's very hard to fight the trend.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we touched on QPR's current situation just before we started this interview. For the third season running, QPR at the bottom of the table, looking likely to be in another relegation battle. Do you keep an eye out for QPR? And in your opinion, what is going wrong with this club for us to be in this situation sort of year after year?
I, you always keep an eye out for your clubs. People say, "What club do you support?" But when you're a football manager, or a football coach, you can't go into it and get completely wrapped up in the environment and not be a fan of the club. I'll always look at Brentford. I'll always look at Rangers. I always look at Forest, etc. I get called from Rangers fans all the time because of the size of the club, and you always look at it. And I'm never going to be derisory, derogatory to any manager or coach. I know how hard the job is, and in terms of your question, I've never met Marty. He seems a really good guy. Seems a really nice guy. So I'm sure he's a really good human being. Um, I just think watching from afar, it's goals. You mentioned that period when the first half of the season we couldn't, despite all the chances. I've watched them play some good football, QPR. I've quietly gone into a couple of games and snuck at the back with a cap on and just watched the game because you love going down the Loftus Road and watching games. But it's all about scoring goals and clean sheets and goals. It sounds very basic, very boring, but at the moment, neither are happening. And it's a very difficult period, but I'm sure the work's been done on the training pitch. But you're still competing at some big clubs, and the frustration for me is evident. You can sense around QPR the frustration, and no one will feel that more acutely than the manager. Let me tell you that, Marty. I'm sure and his staff will be feeling it because that's the nature of the beast. But I hope very much they can turn that corner. Maybe this international break is a little break they need to come back stronger.
Les Ferdinand and Lee Hoos have both been collectively succeeded by Christian Nori, who's a very young CEO who was appointed back in January. This summer, he's overseen our transfers, and there's been a real emphasis on the use of data to identify suitable signings for the team. It's not dissimilar to the approach Brentford were adopting around the time you left the club. So, what do you think about the use of analytics to determine sort of transfer and recruitment?
I did a podcast here today with a really good guy, and this question came up. My background in the city, we had data all the time. We had data way before football. My frustration is that now the trend is almost 100% data. I don't think we're very far away from some of these teams completely removing their human element, their scouting element, and relying solely on data. I speak to analytical guys who speak now as if they're bigger than the coaches. I don't mean that in a derisory way, but they speak so it's about us and what we see. And to me, Connor, it's a balance. Now, when I was at Brentford with Matthew, who's a fantastic, I've got enormous respect for Matthew, but him and the team, that I would say then in my mind, it was probably 65-35 data over the human eye. As the years have gone by, I would imagine now you're looking at 80-20, maybe even 85-15. Some would say 90-10 or more. I just can never see where it's 100% data. And data doesn't always show you what the human eye, and that's where the skill of the experienced guy who knows the game. I remember a really good friend, Frank, went to all the way to Uruguay to see a player, all the way whose data was really strong. And he left the game before it kicked off because he watched the player in the warm-up and said he was shocking for this reason, that reason, etc. And flew home Uruguay. And he was proven right. The player did nothing. The player did absolutely nothing in his career. But Frank said, I saw him warm up. I saw his attitude. I saw how he spoke. Da, 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 da. And everything that the eye tells you, the data probably doesn't tell you, was the reason why Frank made that call. So I just think for me, you cannot rely solely on one source, Connor. You can't because, team spirit. The guy I won't say who, I was on a big radio thing the other day, and the guy said to a top Premier League analyst on the bigger clubs, said basically, we measure anything that counts, we measure. And I said, okay, how do you measure team spirit? And he goes, it's done by looking at momentum and this and that. And it was said, it was almost like stupid comment, go away. I thought you can't do that. You can't measure team spirit. You can't say the guy that might have had a poor run of form, but is a fantastic mentor off the pitch. The Johnny Douglas type at Brentford, or the guys that you'd have seen him at QPR over the years, the guys that Lee Wallace was great. Lee Wallace would tell Chrissy Willock and give him a boot up the backside if he was, and Chris knew that Lee knew what he was talking about. And Ilias respected Lee, and because he'd been there, Scottish International, been at big games, old firm games, and you need that type of togetherness and camaraderie, and you can't always measure it. And they can't always see what goes on behind the scenes. And that's where, for me, it breaks down. So when I hear massively on the data, yes, of course, because AI, etc., is going to get more and more in-depth, more revealing, etc. I think the AI cognitive, where it's going to go in terms of teams and tactics, and I'm sure there's many, many more doors that will open soon. But it doesn't mean, Connor, that the human eye is taken out of it. But I could be completely wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised in 12, 18 months, you and I could talk and there'd be 2 or 3 big teams who have completely removed their human element, their scouting base.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. QPR's home record has been very poor over the past 3 years, pretty much since you've left. And so as someone who's managed at Loftus Road, why do you think that might be? Like, we really seem to struggle to play at home now. Is there rhyme or reason to that? Or is this just a weird pattern that pops up in football from time to time?
No, I don't know. I always found Loftus Road, you know the old story, when I was at school, Frank McClintock, that famous 1977 season, I was at every home game. It was magnificent, and I can reel that team off to you now. But Loftus Road, I remember being this intimidating, tight knit. I loved it because you just felt that all 4 sides tight on it, especially the night games, under the lights at Loftus Road, smell of the grass, the crowd, the noise. It's magnificent. I don't know why. I always found it. I always felt we were going to score late goals. And we did score a lot of late goals, but I always felt that we were on the front foot and we could create chances and the crowd behind it. The only thing I would say, sounds really basic, is sometimes if it's not a big crowd, sometimes when that home stand, for example, is a little bit empty, you see it on TV in a few empty blue seats, and the away fans didn't bring many fans with them, and you
Mm.
had one end basically empty as well. It was a strange dynamic. It just didn't feel like QPR and Loftus Road. But I've got to say, Connor, for me, no, I don't see where there's a problem with Loftus Road. I think playing surface, again, that comes down to money and investment, etc. I'm not sure how good the pitch is today. Fingers crossed it is in great shape. But I always thought it was a really tough place for visitors to come to. The home change room, sorry, the away change room is tiny. It's a tough place, really is. So I think you can make QPR, I'm not saying a fortress, that old cliche, but you can make it tough for visitors to come down. So I always enjoyed it. And the home games, always relished the home games. So no, I don't see any reason why that is. Maybe, as you say, it's just cyclical and it's just the way the game goes.
Broader question now. How does a club like QPR move forward and most importantly, upwards?
I think I don't want to sound too basic, but it comes down to finance. It comes down to finance. I know how hard it is to move. There's been repeated attempts to move and etc. But until you have a ground that you can use throughout the week and get revenue coming in, etc., and increase that bottom line, the owner's just writing checks. And yes, you can get an Eze come along, but I look at Ilias, probably Sam Field, these type of boys now, Jake Salter. These are where's the money if they had to sell. But if you sell, you're going back to square one again.
Mm-hmm.
Not pulling in the 10s, 20s that you'd like to think they're going to get. Therefore, it comes down to finance, and that's the key. I don't know where their budget is. I mean, they spent some money. I think QPR spent some money. You can tell me how much. I'm not sure what it is, Connor, but they spent some money. But it comes down to that quality of the squad, being able to deal with the injury crisis, being able to go out and target someone in January, for example, that you need.
Mm-hmm.
It's been able to lose players to injury and all these various things that the fans know about. But unfortunately, it comes down to the bottom line of budget. And if QPR have, I don't know what they are, if it's a 13th biggest budget, anything better than 13th is a success. As negative as that sounds to the fan base, it's not being negative. It's just a harsh reality. It's when you have the 10th budget and you come 18th, that's when you've got an issue.
Yeah. Now, in June 2022, you joined West Ham as first team assistant coach under David Moyes, winning the Europa Conference League before departing a year later. So what was that experience like working in the Premier League and in a European competition?
Great experience. Difficult as you like in terms of I had two championship offers and I was overseas in the States on holiday with the family and I didn't know what to do. And David and I have gone to the same, purely by chance, we've gone to the same holiday destination for the last 20 odd years and we play golf together. And we played golf and David very kindly made me that offer to come and work with him, be his number two. He said his words very defence minded. I was more attack minded. He wanted to combine it too, etc. And my thinking was I'd never worked in the Premier League in England. And I thought to see the quality of player, to understand the finances, to see what that is all about. But I still wanted to manage. I'd never been a number two. I found it really hard, Connor. I found it so difficult. And that's not in an arrogant way, big-headed way, but having been number one in dealing world and in charge of desks and stuff like that, and to go in a category, even technical director, you're in charge, a category director, you're in charge. You go into first team management, you're obviously in charge, etc. To then go through that and then go number two, that was brutally hard. I found that far more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
Mm.
The upside was you get the joy to work with world-class players. Declan Rice, Lucas Paquetá, Jared Bowen. These types I could read on, Naif Agard. I could just reel off so many good players there. Aaron Cresswell, top players, Craig Dawson, top people. So that side of it was great. And then Europe. And what struck me was money. It was the money, Connor. And I'll never forget, and David doesn't mind me saying this, we would fly everywhere. And do you remember QPR played Blackpool away on a Saturday night? And it was they moved it to a 5:30 kickoff.
Mm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And they moved it to 5:30. And it meant we couldn't get the train home. We missed the last train home.
Mm.
And I think it's like the third game in five we've been on Sky. And I've gone, but we had a game on a Tuesday night. And I asked if we could fly home. Could we possibly, because we were doing well, we were right up there. Could we fly home just to give the boys that rest? So I'm thinking 5:36, leave by 8:30, get a flight by 10. They'll be back home back in London by 11, home by midnight. As it
Mm.
was, we go home I think we go home at like 4 in the morning or something. And I remember the club, okay, couldn't afford it, couldn't afford it. My job is to ask, we couldn't afford it. And then we flew everywhere. And David said to me, what airport did you used to use with QPR? And I said, we use King's Cross Station and Kingsbury coaches. That's who we use. But the Premier League is just awash with money. It's just awash with money, not just the basic wages, not the £50 million fees, but it's just everything. The number of staff, everything about it, Connor, is money. And that's why their first task every year is to stay in the Premier League. But
Mm.
that was so. Going back to your question, I had the choice: do I take this? Do I wait on? There's a one thing on unsure whether that job was going to come about the contract and your ownership. So I had to decide. I'm on a beach, literally holding the phone, thinking, "Do I do this?" And I did it. So many positives. Winning the European trophy was great. That night in Prague, magnificent. And great players, great set of players, full of respect for all of them. Um, People like Sir Mark Noble and Dave Moyes, Billy McKinley, Paul Nevin, Kevin Dunn, all these people, fantastic. Xavi, the goalkeeping coach, great experience. But overall, I want to be a number one, and I found that really, really difficult.
So what does the future hold for you next? I know you mentioned earlier that potential opportunity in the US.
Yeah, I've got an offer to go to the US. It's just I left West Ham, and someone said to me, "I thought you retired." Another one said to me, "I thought you were still at West Ham," and that was a mistake I made probably for many reasons. But people just thought I'd finish your manager. I'm thinking, why? But it just comes down to, when you're going well, football's quite short term. When you're going well, people queue up outside your house. I've had people offering me 3 or 4 year deals and phone calls and agents and really nice clubs and nice offers and a lovely position to be in. And then suddenly you can't get an interview. And I'm sitting there going, my CV that you just reeled off at the start of this, I'm going like, we've got promotions and we've got playoffs and we've got cup finals and we've got squad development and you know, Brentford, we spent 3 and a bit million and they sold it for 45. And so there's all the good positives. My win percentage is high. Why can't I get a job? And you sit there bemused, angry. There's no point, Connor. You just got to move on and say that's the trend. So you do your media work and you do some mentoring stuff and you do what LMA are fantastic in what they do. But it's just a frustration that unfortunately you can't get a job because I think they're going younger, as I mentioned to you. A lot of foreign guys coming in. Good luck to them. But it's just hard. It's a hard environment right now.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, Mark, it's been an absolute privilege to chat to you today. So thank you so
You.
much for your time, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Now, Connor, really enjoyed it. Thanks very much for the chat and speak to you again soon, I hope.